the Devon Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. I'm here with Joann and her wonderful books. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate your having me.
I'm thankful you're here. So you are an author. I see that you have a couple of different books out. You have the book one, Piney Falls Mystery Series, and also the story of Keilah.
Keilah, yeah.
I butcher everything. So
it's all right.
Which one came first?
The story of Keilah was actually the first one that I wrote. I was, my husband had a major heart attack while he was hiking out in the woods, and his heart had to be restarted 6 times. Mm-hmm. And so while he was on life support, and I'm sitting there beside him, and I'm thinking, my whole life I've pushed away this idea that I'm a writer. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden it just sort of came to me, well, if I'm not going to do this now, then when am I going to do it? There's no guarantee that there's a tomorrow. Correct. So during his recovery is when I wrote the story of Keilah. And I had thought, no, one and done. I'll do this. It's over. I have to focus on more important things in life. And something inside me just said, no, this is really who you are. And you've got a lot more books inside you. So I've continued to write. I have 8 books published at this point, and have a 9th one that will be coming out in November.
Wonderful. You're a serial author. But that's what we do. We get bit by the writing bug, and we just start writing. So it starts off with, I'm only going to write one book. And before you know it, you have 9, 10, 17, 20 books.
Right. Yeah, that's my plan. I hope to have 5 books in every series that I have. That's my goal.
That is an ambitious goal. I mean, as an author, I understand.
Yes.
As a publisher, I love that. So you have book 9 coming out, and guessing that's going to be for the mystery series?
Yes, for the Piney Falls series. Actually, that'll be book 5 in that series. So yes, that's coming out in November. And so it's kind of, we're following, not only are we solving mysteries, but there's also a family element. So along the way, we're learning more things about Lainey's family, and she's gaining family members and losing family members. So each book has some component of family at their core. So we've got some more surprising family issues coming up in book 5.
And I see on the cover, you have a little tidbits within the moon.
Yes.
So that's something that I just seen that popped out to me. I mean, it's in the moon, so it's special, right?
Yes. So each book has something different in that circle, and that's connected to whatever mysteries are happening in the course of that book.
Very interesting concept.
Yeah.
I mean, tie everything together. It's nice and neat and wonderful.
Yeah. So the first book takes place in 2 different centuries, and we've got a mystery happening in the early 1900s, and then a mystery happening today. And those mysteries will collide at some point, and both will have to be solved in order to keep everybody in Piney Falls safe.
I love the thing that incorporate history. And then when you take the history element and put it into today's world, because you have to solve this for you to solve this. I love that element.
And another component I'm going to say for all my books, not just the Piney Falls Mysteries or the Charming Mysteries, I like to have strong women. I want all of my characters to be very strong, independent women who don't need a man. They might have men in their lives. They do have men in their lives, but they are very strong, independent women who do just fine on their own.
Well, that's what we need in society. We need to encourage our girls,
right,
to be able to be independent. Independent does not mean you don't need anyone. It just means you're self-sufficient, self-reliant, and you don't have to wake someone up at 2 o'clock in the morning because you need a jar opened or something.
Exactly.
You can take care of yourself and still be in a relationship.
Right. Absolutely. That's kind of one of my messages, but that's absolutely what I'm trying to say, is that each of these women, and the women from the earlier century, they were also independent they had to rely on men, but not because they wanted to, just because that's what the
Culture was.
that's what the culture was. But they're certainly very capable, as you'll see, and very good at problem solving. Well, maybe they wouldn't solve every problem the way we would today, but we're not in their shoes. We're not living in that time. So,
Right. I mean, if you think about it, you go through, and I'm sure you did a lot of research on your
I did.
books, especially for the historical elements. So if
Yes.
you go back 150 years, just given a time frame, women then were not respected like they are now. We've come a
No.
long way as women. I mean, you can't say we didn't solve problems and issues back in the 1900s, 1700s, 1800s, whatever time period you're in. We did it, but we did it from the shadows. Now we're out of the shadows and solving things a lot differently.
Right. Right. And they were basically, I don't want to say they were bought, but they were, women were kind of thought to be a burden on their parents if they weren't married at that time. And so they were living on a farm in Scotland, and their father saw this great opportunity for them to marry American men and go over to America where they would be prosperous. And I don't know that they had a whole lot of choice in that decision. That was just sort of something that you're going to do. And, you just go along with whatever your father says. And they just didn't have the luxury of choice.
Yeah. I mean, if you go through it and you're going through the Ireland, stuff there, but, they write letters if you're prosperous and you're mail order brides. That's where the terminology today came from. It was literally mail order brides.
Right. Right. And that's not quite what happens with these women, but it's kind of similar in that they knew they were a burden to their father, and they knew that this was the best situation for him, and that's why they did it. That's why they got married and maybe didn't make them the best choices in husbands.
Very true. I mean, you look at it, you have over in UK, England, that whole time period 200 years ago. If you're a female, you're basically, here's a dowry. You're being sold to the highest, whatever we can match you with. You're not getting married for love. You're not getting married because you're interested in a person. Half the time they didn't even know the people until they're already married.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that is very true of my characters too. They don't really know these men well. They think they do. They have an idea of who they should be, but they don't really know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, you go and you might know their name and their title. What else do you know about them?
Yep. And I would say that also translates over to the story of Keilah, because that story takes place in Iowa, and in the Midwest, they're up until fairly recently still, it was really expected that you got married. That's what you do when you graduate from high school. Maybe you go to college, but you have to be married. That's who you are. And this character struggles a little bit with that. Well, she struggles a whole lot with her identity, just because she was never really given the opportunity to stretch her wings and figure out who she was. So that brings a lot of problems for her, kind of living in a fantasy world and not necessarily understanding life as it really is. Right.
I mean, you can take that story just from today's element. How many kids are actually expected to go to college and spread their wings versus you're 18, go get married. Right.
It's a very big cultural thing still in a lot of communities in this country, and certainly the one that I grew up in, it was very important to get married. I got married at 19. That was just what you did, and I'm happy to say that I'm still married today to the same man, but we went through a lot of struggles that had we had the opportunity to mature a little more before we got married, we probably wouldn't have had.
Right. I mean, you get married young. How many young people today get married and stay married for more than 5 years? Less
Not
than
many.
less than 50%. But it's
Mhm.
still a cultural thing that either you're independent, therefore no one wants you because, they have this stipulation that you're independent, so you don't like men or you don't like being in a relationship, which is not always the case. It's just
Right.
we choose to be able to do things on our own.
Correct. Yeah. That's how I'm glad to see my own daughters are very independent, and I'm glad they don't feel this pressure that's what they had to do this. That was who they were. They can build their own identities, and marriage and maybe children are later on. So
Right.
I'm glad that we're changing.
My daughter, told her from a very young age, I don't care who you want to be when you grow up, what you want to be. I want you to do 2 things for me. Don't get pregnant before you graduate, and make sure you graduate high school. And she did
Absolutely.
both of those for me.
Good. That's fantastic.
So I'm like, now she's looking at colleges. I'm like, okay, now you're ready for the next step. So she's doing it in her time. It's not, okay, I graduated this day, I have to be in college by this day. No, she's taken time to actually research what she wants to be when she grows up.
That's fantastic.
And that's what we need to teach our children,
Absolutely.
our girls. They
Yeah.
have to learn who they are.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
So books like yours are instrumental in teaching that.
I would hope so. I don't know how many younger people are reading them, but if they do, fantastic. My characters are generally, well, that's not true. So the story of Keilah is someone who's just in her early 20s. And and then also I have some younger characters in my other books too, but the main characters are middle age or older. But my new series, for instance, that I have one book out now called Charming Mysteries. I've got a retiree and a young woman who's early 20s and owns a hair salon and is a paranormal investigator. So they're working together. So I do have some, a variance of ages.
Well, that's always a good thing. And then you have a variety of things. So even though the books may not be advertised for young adult, I'm one of those readers when I was in school I'm going to the adult section because I don't want a childish book.
Right. That's true. Yeah, that's very true. And hopefully then that will attract some people. And I do have as we're developing, back to Piney Falls now, as we're developing characters, I do have some younger characters coming in that are part of Lainey's family. They're joining Lainey's family. So, and they're they're featured in more books as we go.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have so many books, so it's hard to test based on all of them, but you have your series. So if we can, but at the same time, they're all strong, independent women.
Right.
All, spreading their wings in one way or another, depending on the time period and, what is culturally acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you have things that as parents, we can go, oh, we can teach our child this because now we have the idea in front of us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's my, certainly that would be a lovely thing to hear from some readers that they were able to gain something from that or feel like that reinforced something in them, that I don't know, that they felt disenfranchised, I guess, and it made them feel like, oh, somebody understands me, somebody understands who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a great feeling.
I mean, we love our fans. We love getting the reviews. We love being able to interact with them. But getting the ones that go, oh, this is a fantasy book, but something that you wrote helped me go through a problem or help me connect with my daughter or, whatever the or is. And we love that.
Exactly.
This is why we have this show. This is why we try to connect with you, our readers, because we want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if anybody wants to talk to me about the books further, please feel free to reach out to me through my website. There's a form on there that you can fill out, and I believe you can make comments also. But I would love to hear from you. I'd love to have a conversation with some readers.
Now, are you also on social media?
Yes. So I have, my website is joannkeder.com, JoannKeder.com. And then I'm Joann Keder author on Facebook, and on Instagram, I'm Joann Keder _author.
See, we love getting a hold of fans. We give you all these mediums so you can get a hold of the author and
Absolutely.
talk books. I mean, how many times can we go, oh, you don't want to talk books because you don't want to sound like a nerd? Well, when you're talking to an author, you're talking our language.
Exactly. Yeah. And I will say too, I started TikTok, but I've not been too faithful with posting. I've got a few videos up, but it's just one more thing in the day that I don't seem to have time for yet, but I will.
Well, that's for the younger generation. And,
Yes,
you know,
for sure.
We're not there yet. We have to figure out the platform. We're
Right.
still in old school Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So give us time. So your book that you have the one out, and that's coming out in November. Is that the new one?
So the next one for the Piney Falls series is coming out in November.
Okay. And the new one that only has the first book out, that one is what is that one called?
That's the first one is Ocean Berry Blues, and that's set in a little Oregon coast town, and that came out in July. And the second book in that series, Tangerine Troubles, that will be out in March.
Well, see, this is why I'm asking, because not all your books are listed on your website yet.
Right, so, that's true.
And it's hard when you're running a website to keep it up to date with all the new books.
Right.
I mean,
right. That's true.
Yeah. When you have as many as you do, it's hard to keep up.
Yes.
So I was like, wait, there's only a few books on here. So I know I'm missing something here.
Yeah. And also I've got another one, the sequel to the story of Keilah, that comes out probably January, but it may be later. I don't have a cover for that yet, so that's not on my website either. I have a fantastic cover artist in Spain, and I told her, take your time, and that's what she needs to do. So I will put something up when I get a cover there. But I have a prequel to the story of Keilah, and then now I will have a sequel.
So 3 books, and you're going for 5. So I mean, you have everything planned out in your head, I'm sure. So it's just getting it out to the public. And it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a year or 2 years to write a book. I have one book in a series. I've been waiting for 3 years for the sequel to come out. So it happens. And that's a book I'm reading, not one that I'm writing. One that I'm writing is taking me almost 3 years to write that one. So as an author, we ask for your indulgence while we write, because it takes a really long time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes there are things that come up that we just can't predict. For me, that seems to every book, there's something that will come up. I unfortunately had the Delta variant of COVID this summer after I had the shots, and boy, that just wiped me out for a good month. So, that put me behind, and there are things that you just can't predict. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of times you'll see an author says, oh, this book is going to be released at this time, and then it doesn't come out till sometime later because something happened to hold them up.
Yeah, it's either we get writer's block, we have a medical whatever, the story characters just decided we're going to take the story in a completely different thing from what we have planned, or something happens within our neighborhoods, within our community. It's life.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, it's just one of those things. And I guess a frustrating thing for the author is, if you have a job where you go out and you're working on a project and you've got all of these very concrete signs of success, like, I'm going to get this finished today and this finished tomorrow. You don't have that as an author because you're just relying on your creativity and your brain, and if there's some outside forces that are stopping your brain from doing what it needs to do, then you can't stay on task and you can't stay on schedule, and it is very frustrating, and it's hard for people to understand what that's like.
Yes, being an author is being an entrepreneur. We do not have set schedules. We do not have time frames. We do not have, everything that you get for a brick and mortar store.
Right.
It's completely different. We have to create our brick and mortar by our brick and mortar's a book.
Right. That's true.
And it takes forever to get that book to be the way we want it.
Right. And I don't know that I think you could argue the book is never the way you want it because there's always something that can be changed.
Okay. I have one book. I have republished this one book now 5 times, 5 different covers, and I have added something each time I've republished.
Yeah.
It's still not perfect.
Right. Right. And probably in your mind, it never will be. That's just the way we are. That's the mind of an author.
It is the mind of an author, and only an author can understand the madness that we go through and we create in ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. I just went through and I had a lot of Scottish terms in the first Piney Falls book, and I decided I had some people who were struggling a bit with those, and so I took a lot of them out. And so this is actually a republishing now. It's out now if you get the book now. Less of those terms in the book, but still I looked at it as I was going through and thinking, oh, I'd like to change this, I'd like to change that, and that'll just have to wait for the next one, because there'll be another one. There'll be another time that I sit down and want to make changes.
Oh, of course. I mean, if you're an author and you sit down and actually read your book, and you haven't read the book because it's been out for 5 years, and then you really read it and you're sitting there with a pen, regardless if you're sitting there to read it to, make the next one or whatever you're doing, you're sitting there with a pen and changing stuff.
That's right. Or in my case, the computer keys. I don't handwrite.
I don't handwrite unless I'm literally writing in my book. If I'm putting notes in my books because I have to go back into my computer and change this and that and, change the layout or whatever I'm doing with the book, I have books laying around my house that I just have notes in. That's my madness. That's the method of my madness.
Everybody's got their own, and that's okay. So whatever works for you.
Right. I mean, you have authors that if you go into their house, they have scores of books, some of them there, some of them not, and they have notes in the books. They have papers flying out of the books. Have you ever been in some of the authors' houses that have literally papers sticking out of their books on their bookshelves?
I've been in readers' houses that are like that, and I love it. And I have done that too. I have books on my bookshelf right now that have all sorts of little papers in them. And I couldn't even tell you why. That's the frustrating thing. I have no idea why they're there.
No, we don't know why this sticky note has to be in there. There's nothing on the sticky note, but it's in this page for some reason that we forget.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's our process. It doesn't matter if you're a reader or an author, an entrepreneur. We do crazy stuff like this, and it's fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when you connect with us, this is the kind of conversation you're going to have, because we can relate as a reader, as an author, as an entrepreneur, whatever we're doing, we can relate to you.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, I love to hear from people. I'd love to hear about what your feelings were when you read my books, and thoughts that you have on some of these. My characters tend to run on the quirky side, because that's just been my experience with interesting people in life, is they were all a little bit off. So I would be interested to know if people who read the books say, oh, I know somebody like that, or I'm kind of like that. Because you're probably somebody I want to meet.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a quirky, some quirk to your personality, we want to meet you.
Exactly.
You know, we can either make a fantasy character based on that meeting somewhere down the road that we, not thinking about today, but, later on, or we can go, oh, so you can help me develop this character more. Great.
Exactly.
So, yeah, we love this. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This has been really fun.
It has.
And your website again is, if you're in the video, it's above us. If you're listening to this on audio, it's in the comment section.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Thank you again so very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed spending some time with you.
This has been a really fun interview. And thank you again for being on the show.
You bet.
And to all of our readers and our listeners, happy reading.